Well, if you're wondering what happened to the Lada or the Nissan, today's video is for you. Because today, we're going to talk about Lada updates, what happened to the Nissan, and if I traded it for that Avalanche, and how I got accused of scamming someone. So stick around if you want answers on any of those three things. So first up, the Lada. So last time we saw the Lada, I had purchased it, brought it out to the farm, and tried to get it running. But the darn thing wouldn't go. It wasn't seized, but it would only crank over slowly, and then eventually stop cranking, so I think we fried the starter. But it was probably on its way out anyways. And I ended up not doing anything with it after that, and that's how it sat all winter. But then early spring came around, and I was getting low on funds, and had tons of bills to pay. So you can probably see where this is going. So I posted up for sale on the Facebook Marketplace and a few local classic car pages. And it ended up selling in less than a week for my asking price. Now, what was my asking price and how much did I make on the Lada? I purchased the Lada originally for $1,500. I then put an additional $300 into it to try to get it running, for a total of $1,800 all in. And that's including gas to pick it up and haul it to the farm, and for every trip out there to try to get it running and to sell it. I then sold it for this much. So overall, I made $700 on it, and really I didn't do much to it. I bought it, I brought it home, well, to the farm, and then I made, I think, 2 trips out there to try to get it running, and another trip out there to sell it. Maybe about 10 hours total in driving and working on it and loading it up on the trailers. That's $70 an hour. That's not bad. And now the Nissan. So did I trade the Nissan for that Avalanche? The short answer, no. But I also don't have the Nissan anymore. So where'd it go? Pretty much the same as the Lada. My original plan was to fix the few things it needs, like the coolant leak and the window regulators, and post it for sale for $5,000. But I decided to get lazy, not fix anything on it, and post it for $5,000 how it was. Or $4,500 without the tires. I originally purchased the truck for $1,000, and then I put another $1,500 into it, which was mostly the 35s. So I had a total of $2,500 into it. In less than a week, I had it sold. But not for the asking price. I ended up selling it for $4,000 with the 35 still on it. But now here's where it gets good with the Nissan. So when I sold it, the guy wanted me to meet him somewhere, and I did. Started the Nissan. I drove it over to him. I started it again. I drove it while he rode with me. Then he started it, test drove it, which I did not enjoy the test drive with him driving it at all. There was a few issues I had. First issue was he drove it way more aggressively than I do. I wouldn't say like he overdrove it or anything, but just more aggressively than I'm used to driving my baby. And then he tried to put it in 6th gear when it's a 5-speed. That's right, reverse. He tried to put it in reverse. And then he hopped a curb, which I get that it's a truck on 35s, and I probably would have hopped the curb too, but I probably would have done it a little gentler than he did. My main thought was, if he drives it this hard when it's not his vehicle, how hard is he going to drive it when it is his vehicle? Now keep that thought in your head for the story that's coming up. And like I said, I started it, drove it to him. We started it again. I drove it. Then he started it, and then he drove it. So now the truck is started and driven. Notice the emphasis on start and drive. that I keep placing on this. You can probably see where it's going. Start and driven like 4 times, 3 times, 4 times. I don't know. And then the next day I had to deliver it to him. So I started it and drove it to his house. Now, without a single issue, I might add. And I disclosed any issues that were going on with the truck. Like that it had a coolant leak from the weeping hole in the water pump. And that the window regulators were bad. They needed to be replaced. But other than that, it was an overall functioning, running, driving truck that you could daily drive. That I daily drove for a year and a half. And then I'm literally 5 minutes out after dropping off the truck to him and us signing a bill of sale. I get a phone call that the truck is dead. So I turn right back around, even though it's sold as is, where is, and I could have just been like, well, that's your problem now. And I went back to boost him, but to find out it wasn't dead. Instead, it was just the starter was ticking. Which reminds me, that was the other thing that was wrong with it. I knew I was forgetting something. The valve covers leaked. It came with valve cover gaskets. I was just too lazy to replace them, but it did leak quite a bit of oil, which I also disclosed. And if you're wondering how the starter ticking reminded me about the oil, it's because I climbed under the truck to find that the starter was soaked in oil and the connection seemed loose. So I touched the connection, truck started up. I told him it could be a loose connection, or it might just be all that oil's on there for some reason that's causing a problem. And you might want to clean that all up, but sorry, I didn't know about that. He asked me if I'd ever had this problem with the truck. I actually really didn't. It always started for me. So I told him straight up, no, it's always started for me. So I drove off, once again, leaving him with a running, driving truck. A week and a half later, I get messaged by a buddy who bought the Nissan. He states, that doesn't run anymore. I sold him a piece of crap and he wants his money back. So I told him, I'd love to have the truck back, but I had bills to pay. That's why I sold the truck. So I already spent the money and I sold you a running, driving truck. What happened to it? So he told me that he started it and drove it to the mechanics that he picked out, and they did $1,500 worth of work to it. He said that they did the water pump and they did the timing belt. Apparently the water pump leaked all over the timing belt and was wrecking it, which makes sense, it's right there, but I had no idea it was wrecking it. Or it might not even be wrecking it. It might just be due, they're known to go in those trucks. The other thing he said was they replaced the starter, which apparently there was that problem when he bought it. It was ticking. It said in his mechanic thing, he sent me the whole receipt. It said in it that they replaced the starter and there was a frayed exposed wire on the starter that they fixed too. So I'm guessing it actually didn't need a starter. I'm guessing it just needed that wire to be fixed and a good cleaning off of the oil. And it was probably fine. But then he told me that after they replaced the starter, it wasn't running. All it does is sit there and crank. And his mechanic is telling him it needs a control module. And they told him that that part is not made anymore. So he said that he feels that I knew about all these problems, but sold it to him anyways and did not tell him about any of it except the water pump. And I didn't know about these problems. And as for the control module, I'm guessing they're meaning an ignition control module, which I looked it up on Rock Auto. You can get not only one, but 2 different kind of brands on there for an ignition control module. It's like $60. So his mechanic failed there. And I don't think it actually needed a control module. I think they put the wrong starter in and failed there too. I messaged him back and questioned his mechanic, but he got defensive of that and stated that he's been going there for years. But to me, that doesn't mean they're competent or trustworthy. I told him he should take it to my mechanic, Broken Axle. You've heard me mention them before. Because they looked at the truck and did a safety on it when I first got it. Which, if you watch the episode, I go over everything that they found wrong with the truck, which was not much. And I have actually fixed most of it on other episodes on this show. To which he responded, "This whole truck is Mickey Mouse together, and any mechanic that would let it leave their shop should not be trusted, so therefore Broken Axle is no good." Which, other than my janky exhaust that I built and that silly little bungee cord holding the battery down, I don't know what he'd be talking about that's Mickey Mouse on that. But I have a few theories on what actually happened. 1, the truck actually did need a starter. I was just unaware. And the reason that I was possibly unaware is because I never drove the truck that far. I drove it regularly, but I never drove it far and started it again. I always started in the morning, drove to work. It sat at work, I'd start it, I'd drive home. Or even if I had to start it a couple times, I would start it, drive to the corner store, which is 3 blocks away, get some bread and milk, start it again, and drive home. It never got hot. Same with if I did drive it out to the farm, which is about an hour away, but it always sat out there for like another hour before I drove home. So the starter never got heat from the engine at points of time when I needed to start it. Whereas I drove it to him, we shut it off, and then he tried to start it, but because I drove it all the way to him and he tried to start it right away to put it in his garage after signing the bill of sale, the starter was hot, and since it was going, it caused a problem. Or it was the wire that got hot. Maybe it didn't actually need the starter, it was that exposed wire, and the wire got hot and then did not want to perform. My second theory is actually my theory about the control module and why it doesn't run anymore. I don't think it's the control module at all, and the control module is fine. I think that it is actually the starter. You see, most people don't know, not even some part suppliers, that those Nissans actually have 2 different kinds of starters. For example, if I go to Canadian Tire and order a starter for the Nissan, they will offer me a starter. Whereas if I go to Auto Value and ask for a starter, they will say, which one? Is it 2-pronged or 3-pronged? So now moving on with that theory, if you remember the episode where I was trying to get the Beaumont running and I used the Vortex starter, I found the problem that there was not enough prongs on it for all the wires for the Beaumont. And what happens is one of those wires is for voltage regulation while starting. So my theory is they got a starter with the wrong amount of prongs, and it just so happens that now it's not sending enough spark to start. And which, if it would do that, if you measured voltage on the ignition control module while cranking, it would tell you that it's low, making you possibly think that the ignition control module is faulty. Now, I have not told him any of this, that there is an ignition control module, that there's 2 different starters. I was going to, but then he got very rude with me, you know, kind of insulted me, told me my truck's a piece of crap, and that my mechanic is not trusted. So after all that, I decided he was kind of on his own and did not tell him any of this. Theory 3. So this theory goes back to me mentioning earlier about our test drive. Like I said, he drove it a little rougher than I would have liked on our test drive. And if he drives it that rough when it's not his, how rough is he going to drive it when it's his? Maybe figured, oh, it's an old truck, it's got 35s on it, it's meant to be beat on. Maybe he bought it from me, beat the ever-living crap out of it for a week. Then it died. He had it taken to his mechanic. The mechanic said all these things were wrong with it, and he decided to blame me. Let me know in the comments, did I scam him? Was he trying to scam me? What's your theories on what's going on here? please let me know. I want to hear everybody's opinions.